A defiant Benjamin Netanyahu has ruled out a ceasefire in Gaza, saying Israel's October the 7th is like America's Pearl Harbor or 9/11.
Hamas releases a video of women kidnapped from Israel and demands a prisoner exchange.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen offers €6 billion to Western Balkan countries in order to double the size of their economies in the next 10 years.
As Israeli troops push deeper into Gaza, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said there will be no ceasefire on any grounds. Netanyahu rejected calls for a cessation for humanitarian reasons and also ruled out halting the offensive for a hostage exchange.
Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism.
His announcement came amid celebrations in Israel following the rescue of the female Israeli soldier who was being held by Hamas in Gaza. She was freed during ground operations in the north of the territory. Israel has ramped up its operations in Gaza with a probing raid led by tanks into the outskirts of Gaza City. They're said to have advanced on two sides, reportedly blocking the main north-south highway. A video on social media appeared to show a tank firing on a car in the area. Gaza health officials said 3 people had been killed, but this hasn't been independently confirmed. Airstrikes have continued to pound the north of the Strip, but targets were also hit in Rafah in the south. The Israeli Defense Forces say they killed dozens of Hamas militants in the latest attacks. More than 8,000 Palestinians, mostly civilians, have been killed since the IDF launched its offensive in response to Hamas's brutal raids on Israel on October the 7th. Some 1,400 Israelis have been killed. With the numbers of Palestinians displaced growing daily, conditions are worsening. With essential supplies cut, people have been using donkey carts to distribute water.
A barrage of rockets fired from northern Gaza are directed towards Israel. Many Israelis living close to the border with the Palestinian territory have already evacuated. They were warned about the military's plans for a ground offensive against Hamas, which appears to be underway. On Monday, the militant group released a video of women taken hostage during its attack on Israel on October the 7th. It's calling for a prisoner swap. The fate of many is unclear. However, Israel did confirm the death of German-Israeli Shani Luke. Israel says Hamas kidnapped more than 230 people, including foreign nationals. In and around Jerusalem, people ran for cover as air raid sirens warned of incoming missiles. Patients and staff in at least one hospital were moved to safer areas. People reported hearing blasts close by. Reza Khandan says his wife Nasreen Sotoudeh, an Iranian lawyer and human rights defender, has been arrested and beaten. He says it happened during the funeral for high school student Amita Garawand, who died in controversial circumstances in Tehran on Saturday. Local media reports say Nasreen was detained for not wearing a veil and for disturbing the mental security of society. Women in Iran are required by law to cover their heads in public. Rights activists suspect 16-year-old Amita was assaulted by the so-called morality police on a subway car for the same offence. Authorities have denied the allegations. They say she fainted and hit her head. Amita was in a coma for nearly a month before she died. Her family has backed the official version of events.
Ukraine says it's carried out a successful strike on a Russian air defense system in Crimea. Footage from 2020 shows American soldiers using the Army Tactical Missile System, or ATA-CMS. Ukraine says it used the same system in Sunday's strike. China, Russia's defense minister accused the US of fueling geopolitical tensions.
Провоцируя острый кризис в Европе, Запад стремится распространить конфликтный потенциал на Азиатско-Тихоокеанский регион. При этом линия Запада на неуклонную эскалацию конфликта с Россией несет угрозу прямого военного столкновения ядерных держав, что чревато катастрофическими последствиями.
On Sunday, injured veterans were the first across the start line in a 1-kilometer race in Kyiv to commemorate the country's war dead. Each runner chose one person to remember.
Дуже багато побратимів на сьогоднішній день вже не будуть живими, і я не зможу пожати їм руку чи посидіти з ними, але вони лишаються отут всередині на все життя.
Це така вдячність усім, хто захищає і захищав, напевно, нашу країну. І я вважаю, що це просто ще показує те, що ми не є байдужими до того, що зараз відбувається.
13,000 people registered for the race.
Russian forces appear to have concentrated a sizable portion of their combat power around Avdiivka in the region of Donetsk. The UK Defence Ministry stated over the weekend Russia has probably committed elements of up to 8 brigades to the sector. These elements have likely suffered some of Russia's highest casualty rates of 2023 so far. Ukrainian Tavriysk Group of Forces spokesperson Colonel Alexander Shtupun stated that Russia currently has around 40,000 personnel in the Avdiivka direction and is transferring additional manpower to this area. Ukraine's defense minister Rustam Umerov told the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin that Russian losses in Avdiivka amount to approximately 4,000 soldiers. The Institute for the Study of War has routinely assessed that Russian military units are likely generally undermanned and maybe battalions, brigades or regiments in name only, with smaller personnel complements than their echelon designations would suggest. In its intelligence update, the UK Defence Ministry notes that even Russian nationalist male bloggers have been harshly critical of the military tactics in the operation. The nature of the operation suggests that Russia's core military political challenge remains the same as it has throughout most of the war. Political leaders demand more territory to be seized, but the military cannot generate effective operational level offensive action.
A €6 billion plan to double the size of the Western Balkan economies in the next 10 years. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen starts her trip to the region with a serious economic offer and a set of ambitious political requests. In Kosovo, she asked for a drastic de-escalation of the conflict among the Albanian majority and Serbian community.
And we've discussed the topic together that Kosovo could launch the procedure to establish the Association of Serb-majority municipalities. That is the draft statement of last week. Serbia should deliver on de facto recognition. What can we do to lift the measures?
The economic package promised by the European Commission to the Western Balkans has the appeal of an opportunity that can only happen once. There is a general mood in favor of enlarging the EU by 2030. It does mean, however, that the candidates will have to accept political conditions that some of their own population might find difficult to accept. The slowly disintegrating world order means that tough choices will have to be made.
In the North Macedonian capital, President von der Leyen asked the country's Prime Minister to amend the constitution and formally recognise the existence of the Bulgarian minority. Prime Minister Kovacevski will have to persuade the nationalist opposition, though.
Ние имаме неповторлива шанса да обезбедиме европска иднина за државата со носењето на потребните одлуки во собранието, европските интеграции и атлантските интеграции на државата конечно за прв пат во своето политичко постоење во парламентот ќе покажат дека се за европска иднина на државата.
Von der Leyen is also travelling to Serbia, Montenegro and Bosnia and Herzegovina as she tries to push their governments to pursue the reforms needed in view of their integration into the EU.
Across Europe, the housing crisis comes hand in hand with the cost of living crisis. Home ownership rates are dropping and people are finding it increasingly difficult to pay their rent or mortgage. As British social housing expert Phil Jenkins explains, high public debt prevents major government spending to tackle the housing crisis. He says public-private partnerships are essential to help the most vulnerable.
Some of that capital will need to come from private capital markets, and it's really a case of governments creating the environment and the frameworks within which private capital can invest into affordable housing.
In Greece, after a decade of falling prices due to the debt crisis, real estate is having a strong comeback. House prices, both sales and rents, have increased by as much as 50% in the past 7 years. According to Eurostat, Greeks spend the most among Europeans on housing. The government stepping in by trying to bring more apartments to the market.
Το στόχευσή μας είναι να ανοίξουμε όσο γίνεται και κλειστά διαμερίσματα. Είναι εκατοντάδες χιλιάδες, όπως ξέρετε, και στην Αθήνα. Αυτό θα κάνουμε προγράμματα ανακαίνησης, τα οποία δεν είναι μόνο ενεργειακής αναβάθμισης, αλλά είναι και αισθητικής αναβάθμισης. Το πρόγραμμα Ανακαινίζω Νοικιάζω, το οποίο αναμένεται να ξεκινήσει ουσιαστικά η πρόσκληση τους επόμενους μήνες. Και βέβαια, εμείς συνεχίζουμε στο Υπουργείο μας προγράμματα κοινωνικής στέγασης.
Η αγορά κινήτων έχει επιδείξει μέχρι τώρα ισχυρή αντίσταση στην άνοδο των επιτοκίων. Παράγοντες της αγοράς θεωρούν ότι είναι θέμα χρόνου να υποστεί τις συνέπειες από το ακριβό κόστος ζωής και τα ακριβά δάνεια. Ωστόσο, ενδεχόμενη αποκλιμάκωση των τιμών δεν αναμένεται πριν τον επόμενο χρόνο. Από την Αθήνα για το Euronews, Σιμέλα του Χτίδου.